There we go. That was exciting, wasn't it? I've not seen that before.
No, I've not seen that before. Maybe we did something different last time.
Probably. We're live with the faustiest witch of them all, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm all good. I'm all good. I'm
So,
a year older, but we're not talking about that.
almost haunted, but not quite haunted.
Almost haunted.
We're talking ghosts and spirits and such. So, do you like the term ghost, or does it make you cringe? Like it makes me cringe.
I don't feel like it's a very useful word, I think is the problem. It's not very descriptive of what entity it is. Does that make any sense?
Well, assuming it's even an entity at all, technically.
No, I'm not even sure where the word ghost actually comes from. That would probably have been a useful thing to. If somebody is attached to Google right now, Google ghost for me. But yeah, I'm not even sure really where that word comes from. I'm like, there are other words that are quite used in Scooby-Doo that I quite like ghouls and all those sorts of words. But yeah, ghost just doesn't. When I think of ghost, I guess I think haunting. Would that be?
Right, yeah, because that's the thing. That's another word.
To haunting.
Yeah. So ghost, I think if you don't know what it is, you say ghost. That's what I always think. And people say you look like you've seen a ghost, or did you just see a ghost, or I think I saw a ghost. Basically, it's kind of like the equivalent of UFO. It's like I don't know what it was, but it was a flyer.
There was something over there.
It's like I don't know what that is, but it was something that was definitely there, and it wasn't my imagination. So when we're talking spirits, I think sentient energy. So I wouldn't say necessarily ghost, you see. If someone said, is there a ghost? I'd think, oh, they don't know what that is. They know that there was something there, so they're using that term. Whereas if they said spirit, I would think, oh, I know. That is some sort of sentient thing that's there that has some sort of mind of its own. It may not be something human or close to human, but there's a consciousness there, you know?
Yeah, I think when I think ghost, it's intrinsically linked to that. So haunting, like I think here we go. Justin's called what a good guy, Justin. English word ghost continues from the Old English ghast. Oh, ghastly.
Ghastly.
Okay, yeah, ghastly. So it would be something scary and gruesome.
Okay.
Something not of this world, I think.
Which makes sense, because if you're thinking about normally when you say I've seen a ghost, then it is something that's spooky and weird. So there we go. But do you have much to do with ghosts, ghost work?
Not if I can help it, no.
Ghost hunting, ghost walking, or ghost walks, or ghost busting, or something like that. Maybe ghost busting.
Yeah, occasionally ghost busting, but normally it's, bottle them up and experiment on them later or use them for something else, which probably sounds horrific.
It probably does if you're a ghost. Yeah,
it does if you're a ghost, I guess. But yeah, for me, it's just available energy to be cannibalized, shall we say.
But you are a bit of a user, aren't you? If you use humans, why would you stick at living humans? Just stick to the living. Why not move on to the dead ones as well? And then why not move on to other types of spirits? Why just stop at that,
Yeah. Power sources, things to juice up on.
Power sources.
Yeah. That's probably what I use the human spirit for. So it would just, it would translate across to what I would use them for.
Okay. So, assuming that we're going to completely ignore all of the ghostly kind of apparitions and stuff that are not sentient, So all of this stoic fairy stuff. You know, when you see the heads of centurions bobbing along, you know, when you look outside, because the Roman road was a lot lower, and now they're kind of looking, they were walking along. Nothing really there, nothing sentient, kind of boring.
Yeah.
No point in even bothering to pay any attention. It's going to be the same the next couple of nights, you know, this time next week, it will be the same.
Not aware of you're...
Yeah, so talking sentient spirits then. So how would you go about, I wouldn't say diagnosing, but how would you go about categorizing what the thing is in front of you? If it jumps up and it says, hello, I'm a ghost, are your immediate thoughts to say, hello, Mr. Ghost, what are you? Are you going to trust what it says? Are you going to be able to communicate with it in the first place? What are your thoughts about classifications?
Classification, okay. So I'm not very, I would not be very good with trusting, because I'm not very trusting of humans. Why would it be any more trusting of spirits, I guess? So I would probably base it on, well, for me, it would be what I see, what I can hear, and what energy vibes are going through. So I find when you have something that is a sentient spirit that is likely to be attached to a human soul, there is a kind of trackable energy that is bound here. Like you can feel that it's bound here. And I don't mean by some kind of, witchy markings that have been left behind the wallpaper. Obviously, I'm referring to has decided not to move on, or has been stopped from moving on, but that's mainly on the difference I would recognize between other kinds of spirits. So it would be a case of that doesn't feel godly, or that doesn't feel
their
elemental
energetic profile. So much like you might read the aura of a person, you read the aura of a spirit, and you say that's a human spirit there.
That's human.
Not spirit.
It's human, but there's no body.
Yeah, if you open up the hood of a car, the bonnet of a car, there's an engine in it, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you know that you're dealing with a car. What if you open that bonnet up and there's not an engine there, though? What if it's a Tesla? So what if it's something that looks like it's a human spirit? Something masquerading as a human spirit, something masquerading as a dead person. And you open up that bonnet and you're like, there's no engine there. What are you? How do you classify that?
So normally, if it's got as far as managing to trick me into thinking it was human, before I open up it and look at its innards, then I'd be quite impressed as to what has created it. So at which point you'd have an energy signature of where it's come from. So it's a fetch or a homunculus, or so you'd be able to trace back to where it's been created.
Homunculus, egregores. You're using fancy terms now. We can't get onto that. Yeah, we've got to go through the basics first.
We're going through the basics first, but I'm just saying, if it was something else that was masquerading as human, you'd then be looking from where the energy signal is coming from. So kind of like, the planes crashed down and looking for the smoke air as it was, hurtling to the ground.
Yeah. So you're talking about dissection is what I normally talk about. If you're dissecting a spirit, you're tearing it apart, finding out what it's made out of, and then based on what it's made out of, its schematic, map, diagram, whatever, all of the different layers of the onion, you can then say, well, I can see what that is. I know what that is. I know what that's made up of. So whereas you might peel apart a human and then you get to the next level and the next level. So you're talking about taking apart parts of the human soul or viewing parts of the human soul. You can easily identify a dead person because you're used to dealing with people and splaying them open on your metaphysical operating table. So
just metaphysical one.
Seeing a discarnate human is a lot easier. But if you're popping the hood and it's a Tesla and it's got like a boot there because the motor's underneath, or you're thinking, oh, that's quite interesting. How would you go about identifying? Because obviously I'm presuming that the more you work with different types of things, If you've seen a Tesla before, an electric car before, you're going to be able to look at that and say that's an electric car. So if you've worked with an angel or some crap like that before, you're going to be able to say, well, I know what that is. But what about if you open something up or read something and get an energetic profile of something and this not anything you've worked with before? How do you start to work with that? Because we got a couple of questions coming in, so answer that one and breeze over it.
Fine. I'll answer that one.
Feel free to breeze over if you want to.
Breeze over it, yeah, as we do. Yeah, I suppose for me, it's tricky to remember what it was like back then, because it was a long time ago. But essentially, it is once you've kind of got a sensory understanding of what those different layers look like individually. So I'm probably already jumping further ahead than beginners, but I'm kind of saying that once you recognize how each of those layers looks, feels, tastes, I like to use flavor. You as soon as you recognize what that looks like on each energetic level, certain things will have certain layers and not others. So when you find something you kind of like, oh, I've not tasted this flavor before, then to be honest, we go back to the bottling, and I'd probably just bottle it and take it home and play with it some more, but until I figured out exactly what it's made of. But then that's me. I'm not suggesting that that's what beginners or paranormal investigators do.
Right. Yeah, so that's not a recommendation. This is a don't try this recommendation. I think is what they say in there.
Yeah, don't try this at home.
No, if you're going to do it, it's someone else.
I think from a basic level is one, always assume that if it's a human entity, it has the capacity to lie. is what my first assumption would be. So talking to it wouldn't necessarily be my first port of call. I suppose testing what it can or can't do is probably a more interesting way of doing it. But can it, there's that card game you like to play, Find the Queen. Something like that is a great way to kind of test. And maybe we can come back to that in a minute after we've answered some questions and caught up.
All right, I better scroll through some of these questions then. Let's go a little bit further up again. Okay, so here's a nice one. What do you mean bottle them up? Surely they don't like being trapped. Well, for one, who cares what they want? Would be my first approach.
Yeah, it's surely if you're going to investigate, the whole point is investigating. So if that means bottling something up, to investigate it further.
Put it this way, okay? So think of if you are a Victorian explorer and you go to Africa or something like that, faraway land, and you see some strange creature, you
make sure you take two so you can eat one on the way home.
Two and bring it home with you to share with your friends, basically, don't you? If there's something strange, you probably want to experiment with it further, and much like you might take a sample, scientists take samples and stuff. Some unscrupulous, nasty witches might decide to put it in a bottle, or part of it in a bottle, cut a little bit off, a little sliver off or something, put it in a bottle, take
an energy signature or a sample, just so you can analyze it later.
I think the way in which a lot of people might take that is a Ghostbusters film of you zap it and you suck it into some sort of weird metaphysical vacuum cleaner and steal it away.
Yeah.
Whereas, you could do that, I suppose, but that means that you've got a little spirit that you want to, do something queer.
I suppose the other part is people are also used to, by this point, things like The Ghost Whisperer, that wonderful show that I loved. Is it 90s, noughties? 90s, I think, with Jessica Love Hewitt.
Okay.
So that one, or Alison Dubois in the Medium, or whatever she's called, where there is this kind of sense of unfinished business that you've got to kind of complete somebody's work so that they can move on. Me personally, I don't come in contact with enough spirits that have sentience and would need to have some kind of unfinished business. most of what you come across when you're in these kind of places. Nowadays, I have most of those switched off because it gets boring after a while. But is that kind of, you know, I'm only going to be interested with something that could talk back. So the kind of ghostly hauntings of, like you say, legion of Roman soldiers, or you know, what's left over of a Fanny Crannock granny sitting in a corner just likes to ghost people. Like, you know,
Yeah.
How much of that is for me useful? It in my practice it's not. So I'm more likely to go and have a conversation with an elemental, or no, angels. You know how I feel about them.
Angels are dicks. Is that what you're going to say?
Angels are dicks. The if you want to know more, go to our podcast and listen to why.
Which is, I think, is that called Angels Are Dicks? Was that episode? No, Really Working with Angels. That was that one.
Really Working with Angels, I think that one was called. But yeah, I suppose for me, it's what's the interesting part of getting in touch. I think part of that is our ethos, isn't it, of not getting involved. So unless the ghost come and knocked on my door and went, make me go away, or, you know, help move on, I wouldn't feel that it was my place to get involved with moving somebody on. That involves impacting people over potentially multiple lifetimes. So I don't know. I don't know how comfortable. I think I've digressed and run over the hills jaunting.
Unless it's annoying you, you're not going to get rid of it, and you've got no interest really in human spirits because you don't really do a lot of necromantic work.
No.
So why do you find that people do tend to do necromantic work and do want to work with dead human people?
I think a lot of the necromancers that we know, it's about power, and accessing a certain channel of energy is what people are used to doing that for. So they want to get deep into that saturnine current, and access it for whatever reason. I find there are more interesting and more fun ways to use different kinds of energies that aren't the necromantic ones. I don't know. I think there's something. Is dirty the wrong word? And I don't mean like dirty as in. I mean kind of like ground dirty, like trudging through mud kind of dirty.
Calling necromancers dirty.
I think I kind of am. But anybody that's listened to our podcast wouldn't be surprised by that. But you know, but you know what I mean? Like too deeply grounded. It's too rooted. Does that make more sense? Is that better than dirty?
Well, I suppose in terms of when you're talking about dead people, they don't really have a huge amount of power or responsibility. A lot of them, do they? So if you're looking for a friend and you're looking for something to work with, probably not going to put human isn't the first thing that's going to spring to mind, because you're going to want something that's able to do a little bit more. Human spirits do happen to normally be quite weak, and that's the ones that haven't dissolved. So the ones that are still kind of with it, and you know, they can actually do something useful, like you're washing up, for example. Who now I do know a witch who has got one that actually folds up her clothes for her. So I was talking about this yesterday night, actually. There's a certain Welsh witch that we both know who had a spirit, and it seemed to, it was a relative, and it seemed to like everything to be tidy, and apparently it used to clean up after her and fold all of her clothes and stuff, which is quite weird. But obviously, as the power waned and the spirit started to dissolve and move on slowly, then it was less able to do that. So there was less and less things that were manifesting, and eventually it went. So are we going to do some spoiler alerts and talk about dissolving of spirits and the secrets of that? Or are we going to move on to some questions?
I think we should answer some more questions before we forget to do it later.
So we got this one. We are all made of energy. Can you bottle me up? So,
yes.
Justin,
is the short answer.
Bottle you up because you're already in a bottle. You're in a human bottle, a human-shaped fleshy bottle. We could take you out of that and put you in a bottle if you wanted to, or as you're leaving another body, we could get a nice jar and snatch you up and put you in the jar. And there's some unscrupulous traditions out there. I think, did they do that in Santeria, or is it another one? I know that there's one of them where they actually make sure that they try to attempt to bottle up their enemy's souls after they die. So you get some witch and you have to pay her, otherwise she'll bottle your soul up and then she'll start putting you to work in that. Creepy stuff like that.
It's one of those kind of traditions.
Yeah, a lot of those kind of ones where there's a lot of witch wars and a lot of witch doctor versus witch doctor type situation. There's quite a lot of fear involved with someone tinkering in the process of dying, where they won't let your soul move on, so they'll snatch you up and put you to work for a certain amount of time, soul snatching and all that sort of thing. Can't say I've really done a lot of that, not in this lifetime anyway. Well, actually, no, that's a lie. I've done a couple of bits and pieces with that sort of thing, I suppose. So that's a lie. Ignore that one. That was a lie. But yeah, in terms of sticking people's souls in a bottle, then obviously you're talking about that from a normal spirit perspective as well. So maybe it's not a human spirit. You might be putting it in a bottle because it's a pest and it's a nuisance. And you might be wanting to use that to power your spells. Like those little bug lights, you know, these little light up bugs, which they put in a jar and they use them as a little night light and that.
Yeah. No, yeah. So I suppose the only kind of bottling I ever do is, I prefer just to hog tie them in the other room, like with Michael. But for those kind of different kinds of spirits. But I'm unlikely, I guess, to do that kind of work. Yes, I could bottle you, but it would be easier just to lock you in your current bottle as opposed to putting you in a separate one.
So are you talking about locking you in your body so that you are stuck with the corpse that you're in, and when you get stuck in the crematory and you feel it, or when you get buried you feel all the worms are eating you? You're talking about that sort of magic where you're sticking them to there?
So it's probably about the only kind of bottling up of a human soul you would probably do.
And that's just for people you don't like, presumably.
Yeah, otherwise you just... Well, if you're wanting that battery to last past expiry, you're either a case of bottling something to stop it moving on until it burns out, which could go for a while, or you are potentially talking about attaching something to a bloodline so that it's when that's still available beyond that person. But then that's talking some
blood sorcery,
sticky blood stuff, and draw it from their entire ancestral line. Then that would be probably a more effective way than bottling you. So Justin, I wouldn't feel the need to bottle you, but I'm not saying it's not possible.
And that's really just because of the limits of how useful you are, presumably. So you're more likely to bottle up something that's of use.
Yeah, so more a case of...
Think yourself lucky that as a dead human, you're not useful enough to Chris. He's not going to go out.
There are bigger things I could bottle that would power the battery for longer.
Right.
And souls, they can stay in the cycle they're in. That's all good with me.
Okay. Now I know that on a certain podcast that isn't available publicly, you did talk about some of that sticky blood locking people within their bloodline and that. So I don't really want to cover that because I know that's a bit of an iffy area for you, morally and ethically speaking. But let's go back to the under the hood type stuff. So the seeing about how spirits are made up of, what they're comprised of, all that sort of thing, and delving a little bit to that. So assuming you have a spirit, okay. Now let's take a stereotypical case of a mundane person goes to you, there's some a creepy on the land I just bought. I've been a converting the farmhouse. There's some up there. There's a messing about with the builders that are converting the old barn and interfering with their tools and all that sort of thing. Works ground to a halt. Can you come and have a look what's going on? I know there's something there. Everyone's seen some up. There's been a paranormal activity, that sort of thing. What do you do? What would you do? What's your first port of call? Would you bother going there? Or does it depend on how much they pay you?
It would depend on how much was paid, I guess. Okay. Because you'd have to pique my interest enough for it to go, to make the journey, definitely.
So they have to
and for me to deal with a ghost.
Either financial, it's got to be worth your while financially, or it's got to be interesting enough. So
or a good trade-off.
What sum of money gets Chris out of bed to go and investigate that then?
We're not doing that. We're not putting figures on. You know, I prefer better barter, like, your firstborn child, or, so we are more likely to teach you how to deal with it, aren't we? Depending on how quickly they want it gone. If they want something, they just want it gone, don't want to know anything about it, just want it gone, then I'd probably just tell them how to build a spirit trap and then just say, send it me in the post, I'll deal with it later.
And you'd sell it on auction. We should
sell it on auction.
We should start auctioning off spirits we've caught in bottles. That'd be an interesting one. Okay, so let's change this up a little bit. So say that the person that phones you is a psychic who got called in to deal with that, and they couldn't deal with it. They said, there's a thing. I thought it was a human. And actually it was something else. I think it might be a jinn. What happens then?
That would pique my interest enough to go over and investigate.
Your pajamas and put some everyday clothes on and go straight over.
Yeah, I'd probably put some clothes on for that, definitely.
So with gins,
and then go over to investigate.
If you've got a gin, then Chris is more likely to come and play. But if it's just a pesky human spirit, it's not interesting enough for you. So you've got to pay.
I've got use for a gin. I don't necessarily have use for the battery wise. They don't last as long. That's what it comes down to.
You sound like some kind of monster, don't you?
That's fine. I'm cool with it. I'm at peace with that.
Okay. What about the person that says, but that poor innocent farmer is a suffering, and that psychic got picked up and thrown across the room, and you're just there laughing? Have you no heart, man? Can you not feel for these people that are being attacked by some vicious spirit? Do you feel obliged to help, Chris?
No. Is the short answer to that. No.
Okay.
But come on, you're making me look like I'm the bad one.
For nothing, you're a nasty, aren't you?
Fausty is definitely the best word to describe me. But yeah, I feel like you're cheating by throwing it all at me as usual. But essentially,
after I finish asking you the questions, then, because this is your example, you give me an example, then, right? So we've established that a gin's worth getting out of bed for, and I don't mean
a gin is worth getting out of bed for.
A gin is in the spirit type of gin.
Yeah. The question would be what's their problem? So if the case of they're just getting irritated by something, then it would be a case of either talking them through how to deal with it themselves. If, like you say, you've got a psychic that's gone, where this is definitely not a human spirit, come and have a look. That would be a little bit different. But then, because that you've got a situation of actual serious need of removal in a safe way that is not going to leave them with repercussions after I take it away. So, whereas let's face it, ghost is, in all their varieties of, if it's just a recording, then you just suck up the energy and, and get rid of it somewhere else. And I don't mean like dump it off somewhere else. I mean, just use the energy up, because at that point you're not talking about human soul. I think that's where people get connected, and I think that's probably what we should specify a bit more on. So I will make you break down the soul people. But essentially it's a case of, are you just dealing with part of their conscious, in which case they're not conscious, but you've got a recording of somebody's a moment of trauma or a moment of great wonder or whatever that's left an imprint on a space. That's different. You might just want to, use up the energy, or just get used to not looking at it. Like, throw a rug over it. It's never going to cause you any problem. If you've got, a parasitic kind of spirit that's feeding off the family or whatever, it might just be a case of, well, do you want the spirit gone? In which case I'll remove it. Or do you actually want to...
Has anyone ever said no? You've got some kind of spirit that's feeding off of your family. Has anyone at any point ever said, no, that's fine, I think I'll keep that, thanks?
Well, you say that. Some people are like, oh, well, it was their house first. Like, some people have this weird notion of, they were here, so I need to respect the fact that they live here. Like they're like a weird aunt or whatever, that just kind of like, oh, okay. So in which case you're just teaching them to open up a dialogue with them so it can be useful. Like folding the laundry. Like, that's a useful outcome from having that connection.
So what other things gets Chris out of the bed on a morning? Fox spirit, something like that. Interesting enough to connect.
I love a kitsune.
Kitsune, yeah. So you go for a Jinn or a kitsune. You don't want to add any more human spirits to your collection.
No.
Would you? Here's a question, right? Maybe it's an angel or some sort of angelic kind of thing that's causing the trouble. Most likely not haunting. Most likely someone's upset something and an angel's attracted to them for some reason. Would you get out of bed for that? Because I know you hate angels, so would you think I can kick some ass, bring it on? Or would it be a case of it's interesting enough so you'd go then?
No, you're just talking about a basic banishing or removal again, aren't you? So you're not going to bottle. Yeah, I'm not going to bottle an angel. There's no point in that.
Okay.
And it's not as simple as using up the energy because of what they're interconnected with. Yeah. But it is a case of going, what have you done? Either apologize or kick them out. Like, those are your choices.
Okay.
So yeah, but I'm unlikely to get out of bed for an angel.
You banged an angel once. That was kind of because it was, that one time I'm thinking of the last time, unless the last time wasn't the last time I'm aware that you did it, but the last time I'm aware that you did it, that was a pesky thing that was affecting and annoying you and someone else that you're close to. So that's not really a case of going out your way to do that. That's a case of it's in your environment.
No, I just had to go to a different room.
Okay. Yeah.
So like I said, unless it's affecting my space or somebody who has actually reached out to go, can you come and deal with this? I'm not going to go out looking for them if that's what you're asking.
Yeah. Okay. So
you were supposed to break down the soul a bit.
No, I wasn't. I
never had another question.
They believe that's why ghosts may walk through the walls, as the layout of the building may have been changed, right? So that's talking more about all this not real ghosts, the fake ghosts, stone tape theory ghosts, the recording type ghosts. If you change the layout about, they walk through a wall, that sort of thing. Not interested in that. I've no interest in that whatsoever because they're boring.
No.
So
I used to have a lot of that with one flat I had. I think it used to be in an orchard, and where they'd put the kind of granny annex that I was living in. It seemed to be a thoroughfare, my living room, where they're just constantly people walking through.
Was that the Peeping Tom that you had?
Oh no, there was a Peeping Tom at the same house.
That was the same house.
It wasn't actually a Peeping Tom.
Right.
That's just what we called him. But that was a recording where he used to, like clockwork, several times a day, just kind of walk in from kind of stage right, and then kind of stand in the window looking in, but not actually looking in. So whatever was there, that's what he was looking at. It had no interaction with me at all. But like I said, it didn't bother me. It used to freak out sensitive friends if they come round and I forgot to mention it. And you leave the room for a second and then like, like, yeah. But but no, it didn't bother me. So I wouldn't have gone out of my way to bottle it or use its energy up or anything. I just left it about its business. It wasn't affecting me.
Well, isn't that what they call character? You know, when you go into a house and you've got the nice oak beams and you've got this and that character to the building, bit of history. Well, there's a certain amount of spiritual, metaphysical character, little recordings and such like that. Our friend Lady Poison's got a couple in her house, but she's also got an actual spirit that was causing some problems recently, which I find quite interesting because that's an ethics thing as well. Because there's no way she could get rid of that spirit perfectly easily, and yet it's causing a little bit of trouble for her, and she's willing to put up with that. And tells it if it goes too far. I think the spirit knows that our friend Lady Poison would get rid of it. But it's interesting because she's going to put up with that, and it is a little bit of an annoyance to her. But that's an ethics thing, isn't it? I mean, where
that's totally an ethics thing where literally, you know, she's more than capable of dealing with that, but she feels some kind of, for lack of a better word, loyalty to the fact that that person has been at the house longer than she has.
Yeah.
So therefore doesn't feel it's her place to evict her, essentially. But, you know, at the end of the day, if a spirit has decided to stick around in a house for 200 years or whatever, a bit of a strange one for me. I don't see why a spirit would want to linger that long, but
sentient thing, and it's not a recording or
a sentient being,
like
exactly. Yeah. Why would you want to stick around unless you're waiting for something? In which case, you know, like I said, if you're the sort of person who wants to know why it's there, then fair enough. I would be more inclined to find out why if it's sentient. If it's got no understanding and it's just a recording, then I don't see how that affects your life. Just ignore it. You know, unless they like to put on a scary devil mask and run around, you know, doing willy cartwheels or something. And that's, you know, scaring the children. Like, I can kind of understand getting rid of that. But if it's not affecting anybody and it's just a recording, then I don't see the point of getting involved. But yeah, if you've got a sentient being that for whatever reason wants to stay there, then that's a case of bargaining, like anything else. Like, you know, Lady Poison, you know, has a certain level of ground rules with her, which is, you know, she can stick around, but you start to annoy me, there's no problem. I've got no issue with putting you in a bottle, kind of thing. I'm pretty sure that's not what she would do. She'd probably do something far more heinous than me, obviously. But you know, again, I don't. It doesn't interest me. So unless it actually annoyed me enough that I felt the need to do something about it, I probably wouldn't get involved.
Okay.
But you were going to tell us about the slices of the onion, so you're not skipping that one.
Right. So ask me a question then. What's the question?
So the question was, we keep talking about levels of sentience,
right,
and kind of peeling away the layers of the onion. Explain a bit about what we mean by the onion, and maybe give some detail as to the first basic layers and how they interact differently.
Okay, so you're talking about two things there. I think you're talking about psychic development, the being able to sense, see, feel, you know, that sort of thing, spirits and other people and various other things. But then you're also talking about kind of, to a certain extent, metaphysics, the physics of what is everything made up of. So I'm normally liking that to the magical periodic table. So like the periodic table of science. Well, what about the metaphysical periodic table? If you're to take a magical object, for example, and reverse engineer how it works, you're basically taking it apart. Well, if you dissect a physical body, you're taking it apart to see how it works. When you're talking about energy and the different things that people and things are comprised of, whether it's the universe or whether it's a specific spirit, people throw about the idea of energy. Well, spirits are all energy, but no one expounds on what that actually is or what that means.
No.
It's not one energy, it's a bundle of different energies. They're all slightly different. So if you're talking about, okay, how do you dissect energy? Well, it's going to be streams of different types of energy, much like what is an element. The elemental periodic table in science gives you lots of different elements that things are made up of. So you have all of these different elements that you put together in different forms, and then they make a thing like my printer that's sat over there, which you can't see. It's all comprised on, you could break that down onto the elemental periodic table and say, well, what's made out of. But you can do that with spirits. So if you're talking about all human spirits, they'll all be the same. They'll all have the same energies there. So whether you take a spirit such as Chris, because of course he's a human, but also he'll have aspects of his spirit form, so his soul essentially is what you're talking about. But you're talking about a lot of the time, unless it has dissolved away, if you had a spirit of the dead, a sentient spirit of the dead person, that's still got the same stuff, still under the hood. It's just that the shell of the car is not there. So it's like a naked car. All of the nice fancy paneling's gone. You just can see all the gubbins inside it, you know. So it's really understanding how that works and how that is and what all of these energies are, because then you'll be able to identify it. If you take the casing off of your iPhone and see what's behind that, it doesn't matter what iPhone you get. If you see that case taken off, you'll know that it's an iPhone by not seeing the case. If you show someone a case or you show someone a human body, they'll say, well, that's a human. But at the same time, if you view it from an energetic perspective, not using the physical eyes, but using the other eyes, as they say, you're looking at what's behind that, the next layer of the onion. And of course, there's more than just human spirits. Human spirits have got the same structure, schematic, but inhuman spirits might not necessarily. So if you've got something that is something pretending to be something else, it might look visually or on the outside layer, might look like a human or something, or dead human or ghost. But then when you peel back that layer, you're actually thinking, that's another type of spirit pretending to be something. And that's what people fall down on, because they fall down with the communication and not being able to trust the spirit and not being able to even communicate with the spirit in the first place. But then a lot of people fall down, and I tell you who's the worst for it is normally psychics. They get the first layer of the onion, they can see it and look at it, but they can't move beyond to that second layer. So they might be able to, that's why you hear a lot of psychics that get fooled into spirits telling them that they're a dead child or something like that, and they ain't actually a dead child. It's someone's messing around with them, because that psychic can't peel back the next layer. All they see is, I see the child there. There's the child there. I can see them.
I find a lot of that is, I think, practice, isn't it? If you're used to looking at spirits of a certain kind, you kind of get kind of nose blind of they all kind of look the same. You stop using the other senses. So if they're used to always looking at something, they don't think to listen out or taste it. Like, you get what I mean? Like, I'm using random senses there, but do you get what I mean? Like, if they're a psychic that's used to seeing, visually seeing something, they get used to looking for that.
Yeah.
As opposed to going, okay, well, for a moment now, I'm going to just see what you taste like. At which point you'd be so most people are not going to look beyond that facade unless they feel they need to. And as the game tends to normally be identification and, you know, of who it is. And by that, it's normally, am I expecting to see, you know, if you went into a certain house and there's a spirit there that looks like Bugs Bunny, you then go in, oh, well, that doesn't fit. Whereas if you're going in there and you're expecting to see a World War II veteran spirit still in the gear, when you see it, that's, you're looking for that confirmation of, I've seen it, as opposed to going, oh, well, is it really a World War II? Because they're looking for that. Whereas actually, if you're going in there kind of going, I know nothing about this space, what's there, then you're going to be more conscious of, oh, well, that, I wonder what that is. Is it really what it says it is? With us, I guess we always assume it's something's lying.
We're like Doctor House. Everybody lies.
Like Doctor House, yeah.
Spirits lie. And everything lies. You've got to prove that it's actually telling the truth, or just assume it's lying.
So for me, I think that's a good segue there for you to explain your Find the Queen method. I think because that kind of gives an idea of what's, you know, being able to, what the difference is between a spirit that just happens to be there and has some kind of pre-recording, so it might just keep saying the same phrase over again, or a same set of phrases, which almost makes it appear like it's having a conversation, and those that are actually sentient.
Okay, so you want to talk about paranormal investigation and paranormal investigation?
Just a little bit.
Oh, just, you know, it's a touchy subject because I always end up offending someone.
Well, okay. I don't want you to offend. I just want you to actually tell the method, why you do the method.
I'll try not to. Right. So when you're dealing with psychics, a lot of psychics talk about their gifts and things like that. All of the clairaudience, the hearing, the clair, you know, cognizance, the downloading of information, clairsentience, sensing of the palate, the sensing of information, whatever the visualizing one is, clairvoyant, the famous one, you know, all that stuff. That's fine. I've always said that clairsentience is the most important, because if you're seeing something, you're seeing what it's projecting at you. Can't trust that. If you're hearing something, you're letting it talk to you. Can't necessarily trust that. With clairsentience, what you're doing is you're pushing a little bit further. So you're developing that taste, that palate for what the energy is, what's behind that. That's why I try to work with psychics and help them develop more clairsentience than the clairvoyance and the clairaudience, because they're not really important for working out what a spirit actually is. Communication is
me, I get them in. I get the clairvoyance and the clairaudient ones to switch those off for a bit.
Yeah. So obviously paranormal investigators, sometimes they have a psychic in that. It depends how good the psychic is, because the majority of them are absolute crap. But of course, a lot of paranormal investigators don't work with any sort of psychic ability. They don't develop it. A lot of them don't even think they can. So they know nothing about psychic ability whatsoever. They just go by the little light boxes and such. And I do try to explain what the purpose of what they're trying to do is. If they're trying to explore something, I'm presuming it's a paranormal investigation. So something's afoot they're trying to get down to the bottom of. They're not going by let's go and see if this house is haunted. I'm presuming that that's something's attracted their attention. So whether someone's being haunted,
or gone in for a reason,
they're going there for a reason. They're not just stopping by. Oh, look, there's an old pub. Let's have a spot of lunch and stay after hours and see if there's anything here. Not so much about that. Obviously, they don't necessarily have the tools to be able to do a lot of work that's important. They can't see the ghosts. They can't hear the ghosts. They can't sense the ghosts. They can just call out and hope that the ghosts have the power to affect changes in the physical world. So can they move the objects about and stuff like that? Or can they influence someone's nervous system essentially to manipulate a Ouija board or something like that, right?
Or a pendulum or something.
Yeah. So what I've said about that is that you're always forgetting what the purpose of this is and how useful it is even taking the time to even bother to talk to a spirit, right? So if you can't really hear it and you can't see it or anything, you're using one of those kind of stereotypical paranormal investigation methods, like a Ouija board or something like that. The problem that I tend to see is they ask questions, and they then ask crappy questions like, were you a man, were you a woman, who were you, can you tell me something about that? How they're going to find out whether that spirit's telling the truth or just messing with them, I don't know. But also, it doesn't really demonstrate anything other than someone or something can make up a story. What I try to get them to do is to push what the spirit's actually capable of doing. So one simple little technique that I showed a bunch of girls that were doing the, I don't know what they call it, but they had like a glass tumbler, like a planchette, and was just moving it from side to side, yes or no questions. I said, look, instead of asking it yes or no questions, because to be honest with you, it was boring the shit out of me, because there's only so many times I can listen to a bunch of people say, were you a man? Were you a woman? Were you born here? Did you love your family? And all that sort of crap.
It's 20 questions, isn't it?
20 questions. I said, let's play a little game, shall we? So I had not my tarot deck, but I had a normal deck of cards. And I thought, what I'll do is if I take 3 kings and 1 queen, and I put them in the 4 corners of the table. So a king, a king, a king, and a queen. And I'll say to the spirit, I'll take my hand off of the glass, say to the spirit, right, move to the lady, move to the queen, the card. Because the queen, you know, when you're talking about a lot of spirits, they're not very old, are they? A couple 100 years old at the most. Most things can identify genders, men and women, and playing cards often, if it's a European thing, goes through generations of being able to identify that. So I said, look, it can go to the queen, because it was pushing the tumbler to the queen. So then what I said is, okay, let's turn them all upside down. Leave them in the same positions, but turn them upside down so no one can physically see the actual pictures. They just see the back of the card. So it went again to the queen. Well, I didn't change the position, so it went to move back. Then what I did was I said, this will be interesting to see if it can see where the queen is. I took all the cards off the table, shuffled them up, and put them down in different locations, all face down. So none of the people with the fingers on the tumbler knew where the queen would be. It's a 1 in 4 chance, sure, but they didn't know exactly where it is. And I said to the spirit again, move it to where the lady is. And it went. And of course, I flipped the card up and it was the lady. So we did that a couple of times. Fortunately, said group of girls in the paranormal investigation did what a lot of those sorts of people do, got freaked out and then wanted to go home. So I was like, no, this is the point where you've got something that you can clearly talk to, that clearly can see more than you can, because it's working from a 4th dimension. It can see through the table at that point. It's through the table at that point, you know, it can see things and interact with things, and it's got a communication enough for you to be able to say to it, do this, and it can do it. So it understands you. I was like, that's quite good. That's quite good. A lot of people struggle to find a spirit like that, and you want to bugger off home. What's the point of that? And I said, there's a lot of extra things that you could do. Put more cards down, see if they could explain. And then I said, you know, none of this is practical. Now that we know that the spirit can see things, what you should start then doing is expanding things. Can it move an object? Does it know where there's buried fucking treasure or some shit? You know, this was a public
something you can do with it.
Something that's useful. I mean, asking it where it was and what it's lived in its life story. I mean, come on, go to Waterstones and buy an autobiography. There'll be far more interesting things than that.
Storytelling.
But actually saying to a spirit, look, okay, this is a public building. Has anyone that you're aware of, spirit, dropped any money on the floor somewhere? And if so, where is it? Because I want a couple of quid, you know? It's like, go and get them to do that, for crying out loud. At least that's useful. At least then you can go home richer than you arrived. Unless you are one of the paranormal investigation groups and it was charging like 60 quid per ticket per person. It's like they're going home with a lot of money. But it's like, come on, you need to be thinking outside of the box. I mean, that's the one thing I'd say about witchcraft is it's entirely practical. You're always talking about what's the practical application to this. Oh, the spirit
Yeah,
can
yeah.
see things. The spirit can relay information. Okay, go and spy on my enemy's spirit. That's useful.
What's my ex doing?
Yeah, well, maybe that's not so much useful because, of course, they're
Not useful to us, but that's the sort of questions we get, isn't it?
Well, they're crying alone at night because you
know,
left them, aren't they? That's what they're doing.
Yeah,
or that's what
they want to know. And that's the difference. It's like, but that's the difference, though, isn't it? Is that for us as witches, we want a practical application to what we're doing. I know a lot. I know, and you know, we're probably being a little bit unfair because a lot of this is paratourism, isn't it? Of the fact of you've got people that want an experience. They want to go and see something. So, you know, Find the Lady is probably all they need to kind of affirm what they want to discover, which is that, you know, life after death or spirits exist. Like if that's all their job is to tick that box. But what interests me is more a case of when you've got a paranormal team that want to go in and search a place themselves, so they're not inviting people with them, but that they are going in to go find out something. To me, I sometimes wonder what I suppose it's because it's sciencey, isn't it? It's like it's the same thing that I get irritated with certain parts of archaeology, of they just want to prove a particular theory. So what they're doing is trying to find a scientific method that can prove that they get funding for the next time they want to do something a bit more risky. Like, you know, so maybe to a certain extent there's an aspect of that of, well, I need to test that this machine works. The best way to go test this machine works is to go and take it to a haunted house that I know is haunted, and we'll see what we can get them to do. So for us, it would be a case of, well, unless I'm going to bottle him and use him as a battery for something, or he's going to be able to tell me where there was buried treasure, and I don't mean like a couple of quid like Liam wants. I want, you know, the bottom of a galley, please. Unless you know where you left that ship, like, or why are you still here? It's probably what I would be asking. Would you not rather be having another life somewhere else, going to the next one? I suppose depends on what your understanding, I guess, of soul cycles, and if you even believe in a soul, I guess, is a big part for some of them.
The point of the practicality is you're always pushing. With practicality, you're always pushing. With, oh, I'm proving a theory, and that's it. I've proved my theory now. It's kind of useless. At least with that, we could take that further and further and further. So like all of these ideas of like, they did this thing like called table tipping, where they push it and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, I have no idea what the purpose of this. I don't have any clue whatsoever, but I could tell that the spirit was too weak to do anything. They required a lot of energy. And I did say to the people, why do you care to interact with this spirit if it's not even powerful enough to move the table on its own and you need it? And I said, why aren't you trying to help that spirit by feeding it? Can you make it more powerful? Can you adopt it as a pet? I think of a lot of spirits actually, and they don't understand this. Think of them as those malnourished pets from the rescue home. You know, they're quite weak. Actually, if you take a weak spirit and cultivate a relationship with it and feed it energy and teach it, you can get it to do some pretty amazing things. Much like a pet, you can revive back to being like from all bony and like scaredy cat to actually a normal everyday cat that goes and catches rats and stuff.
Yeah, I think part of that is because they forget what it is. So it's a spirit. When it had a body, we eat and we sleep. Those are the things that, you know, allow us to function, allow us to have enough energy to go about and do our business. After the body's gone, unless the spirit is feeding in some way, shape or form, it is going to diminish. So unless it's, you know, some cool witch that's decided to trap somebody somewhere and has left enough power to keep them on, that it's highly unlikely that you're really going to come across anything older than 50 years or so that has the power to do something like that, unless it is feeding. You know, if it's chose to stick around longer than longer than 100 years, then either it's got a really good food source, and it knows what it's doing, and it's there for some kind of nefarious reason. Because if it's just a case of this person died in trauma and therefore is still stuck around, by the time you've got around to looking at it, especially if it's a World War II veteran, like I'm not even going that far back, its energy level's going to have diminished since. So, and I think that's important for you to kind of point out that, unless you're going to take food for it, or you're going to actually lend it some of your energy in order to do it. Hence why they use the methods like pendulums and Ouija boards and table tipping, because those methods are all reliant on idiomotive response, and therefore is using your energy in order to make them happen. The difference is, like I said, with what we're doing is, can you test it in I say we, like, it's not something we would waste time doing, to be honest, unless somebody really, really wanted us to do it. For me, I would be wanting to know with, how can I get it to fold my laundry or find me that galley? Because that's what I would want to get out of it. But then we are Fausty witches, aren't we? So of course that's what we want. It's for personal gain, surely. And I've gone off rambling.
So we are now out of time. So because we're out of time, I'm going to leave you on this last thought. Okay. When you're talking about spirits now, there's not many old ones, because the old ones you see about, like King Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn and all that crap, recordings very often, not really any sentience there. But think about the sentient ones and why they don't seem to last. Why aren't there any cavemen that are still walking about? Why aren't there any people from Egyptian times that are still walking about? Next time you see a lava lamp, look at it, okay? When you see the heat source, the energy, watch what happens at the moment of death with that energy that has enough to float up and stay there. And then what happens when the energy wanes and it starts to fall back down again? Where is the heat source coming from? And what's the bottom? If the bottom's the earthly plane, then it might explain reincarnation to a certain extent. Does that person or that spirit have enough energy source to keep them there? Or are they just going to drift back down in order to mix around with the goop at the bottom and then eventually die and go back up again? Not saying that's the secrets of reincarnation or anything like that. No. But hopefully if you actually think about that, you never know. You might come to some interesting conclusions. And the important thing is, don't be a philosopher and just to think about it and leave it at that. Go and prove it. Go and experiment. Go and test it. Go and watch someone die and then tinker with them after they've died and that. Try and keep a spirit going for as long as possible. Adopt one as a pet maybe and feed it and see if that makes it stronger or not. But there we go.
Get it to fold your laundry.
Yeah, see if you could get to do some chores and that. Might require a little bit of training, but to be honest with you, when you get good at it, it's a lot cheaper than hiring a housekeeper, and you don't have to wait for your kids to grow up until they start becoming useful. Spirits takes less time. So,
Yeah.
But there we go. We're out of time, so thanks for watching, and of course we'll be back every Wednesdays at 8 o'clock.